All right, all right, all right, all right. Good morning, everybody. Dun, dun, dun. Good, you see, I like it. Mashes into it. Okay, so guys, on a scale of 1 to 10, how freezing is the studio this morning?
It is not that freezing. It is not that cold this morning.
It's a lie. It's
Okay,
because
well,
we're wearing long sleeve jackets. That's the that's the reason why. Also, I think Mash just took like a quick run from the parking lot,
Yeah.
so he's sweating right now.
I'm
Yeah,
always
Mash is
sprinting
warm
up
because
in here.
Mash does like a quick cardio session before the show every morning. That's why he's not cold. The rest of us. Listen, I woke up this morning and as I got out of bed, I was like, oh God, all right, winter's here. Hello. Hi, how you doing? Nice to see you. I knew you were coming. Can't say I'm thrilled that you're here, but listen, it's
only
mid-April. Guys, it's
I know.
mid-April. Like, if we are complaining about the cold now, we are in for some pain.
One thing I've learned over the years is that every year, 1st of June is when that cold front hits. That cold front that makes you realize that, I guess it wasn't cold all along. That cold front.
God. So in other words, you just got to shut up and grin and bear it. And this is not even the worst. And one of these days, probably around June when Mash says, you're going to wake up and you're going to go, oh, fuck.
Absolutely. It is coming. Count the days and enjoy the autumn weather for now.
Well, I think we should put up some kind of scale in the studio, and then depending on where we put the little arrow, that's how much complaining we can do about the cold. Right now, it's probably like a 4.5 out of 10.
It is.
Okay. Wait, does this? I saw this in the comments, Gareth, this whole week. Does this mean you're bringing Ugly Hoodie Friday back?
We might have to. We might have to do that.
Because if it's getting this cold, I mean, we might as well.
We might have ugly hoodies.
Well, I mean, I've only got like 2, and I used them both up last year when we did this. But maybe I'll buy one, just so that I can compete. Let's just change the subject. There's nothing more boring than people talking about how cold it is.
But the weather.
Yeah, I know. So, all right. We talked about this with Pumi one Thursday, and I can't believe it's turned into such a thing that now, according to Ryan anyway, you went to the mall this weekend, and you had like police and community service members and people of the community policing forum all guarding the mall near where you live because of Luh Twizzy's.
Yeah, because of Luh Twizzy. No, can I tell you? So we drove. It's like Clearwater Mall. It's like Clearwater Mall, and as we were driving in, my mom says to me, "I don't feel safe. There's like a lot of people with big guns," and I'm thinking, okay, that's just like it's probably one of those money collection.
The transit people, because they always get hit by the crooks.
And I'm like, we'll just park somewhere else.
How weird is it in South Africa that in very few countries, except countries that are at war, do you see guys walking around with like actual semi-automatic rifles
for kids.
Brandishing them in public. They've got them across their chest like this, and they got their bulletproof jacket on. And you're like, holy fuck! I mean, are we in a war zone? You realize, no, you're just a South African near an ATM.
We're just being defended against kids.
No. So this is before I even knew. So I'm like, but hold on, there's way too many of these guys just to be like roaming around, for one like transit vehicle. And I start seeing, but it's not just like regular guys now. Now they've got like these massive pads on, they're carrying the shields, and it's fidelity out in full force, right? So I'm thinking, hold on, something's fishy, and I'm even seeing the cops working with them, or some of them anyway. So I go like up to the entrance, and I'm like, let me ask what's going on. Before I even open my mouth, this dude's like, he's having an argument with this cop. It was obviously an off-duty cop, because she couldn't understand why there was so much security and why they needed it. And it was this Afrikaans guy, and he was losing it. He's like, oh, fine, you don't want to hear? It's these Luh Twizzys. We heard this is where they're hitting this weekend. Like, how do you not know about this? So now there's a rule. I don't know if it's still in place or it was just for the weekend. But no kid under 18 was allowed in the mall on their own. They had to be escorted by a guardian or a parent.
Good.
And I'm like, are we really living in a South Africa where kids, the one place kids can go, they can't go?
No, these guns are for the kids. The AK-47s are to protect us from the kids, from the Luh Twizzys.
Okay, so this is so complicated. So what do? Do you just ignore it and let these little fuckers run riot and ruin everyone else? You know, the mall is not there for the children to have something to do. The mall is there because the shops want to sell. The restaurants have customers. They want to make money out of people like you and Mash and me, right?
Exactly.
So,
but it's also a fun experience for the kids.
So, okay, let's take up both sides of the argument. The one side of the argument is like, well, the mall doesn't exist for these kids. They've proven already they can totally screw the place over. They can infiltrate the place and make like this huge crowd and intimidate people, make a lot of noise, make businesses close their doors. They can walk into shops and cause chaos. I don't know whether they've actually done any physical damage, but they could. And why would you risk that in a country where we've already, like a year or so ago, we had riots and people were like super nervous, and you know, everybody's nervous. I mean, like even when Julius called his shutdown, and even though it was a disaster and like nothing happened, people were still nervous. Now, if you've got, let's say you've got one shop, it's your whole life, put all your money into it. You really need this shop to work. You don't have savings because you've used them all to make the shop happen.
Right.
You
pay insurance.
This is it. It's if this goes bust, you are fucked. You have to start again, and you probably don't have any way to start again. So, like, this is your life. You maybe got a little restaurant, selling some stuff or whatever, and you managed to get at an exorbitant rent a spot in a mall because you think, well, that's the safest, and there will be customers. It's a big mall, and then you hear about this Luh Twizzy thing. So you call up the mall management and you're like, hey, listen, motherfuckers, I'm paying you a lot of rent. I'm paying you a ton of rent every month. I don't want some 16, 17-year-olds pitching up here on a Saturday night and turning my shop into pandemonium. And you can't guarantee that I'll be safe from that shit. You better do something. So the mall's like, oh shit, well, we've got about 4 calls like this today. We better do something. They go off to a meeting and they call in the community policing forum and they're like, listen, we need some protection from these Luh Twizzys. And I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? But this is from their side. Now,
no, I know.
On the other side, you got these kids. They've got nothing to do. They're bored shitless because they've been in lockdown for like 3 years. They have been told they're not allowed to leave home. They can't go into the streets because the streets are fucking dangerous. They can't go to where they might have gone in their neighborhoods because there's like people doing tick. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to see their friends. Everything's just like closed to them unless you arrange something. And like most of these parents are complete fucking lunatics anyway. They just let their kids do whatever they want. Most of the parents are out puzzled. They don't know. The kids don't know what to do with themselves. They're like, well, we'll get together in the mall and like we'll just get together and let's flex our muscle. Let's see how much we can do. Like we're excited. We could do something. And then also, suddenly they get there and there's like a bunch of guys with guns, and they're like, oh my God, we can't even do this. This country's horrible. Horrible. What a horrible place to grow up in.
Exactly. And I remember I used to go to the mall alone at about 13 years old. From 13, I was already going to the mall alone to go see movies with my friends and all of that. So these Luh Twizzys are people who are about 16, 17 years old. Imagine having to escort a 16, 17-year-old to the mall. They don't want to be with you. You want to go to Woolies as the parent. Your child wants to go to, where do the kids go nowadays, Ryan? What shops do the kids go to, the kids?
But that's it. And then also, you trying to explain this to older people who don't really understand what Luh Twizzys are or what this trend is.
Okay, so Ancient Ether's asking the question. So you try and explain it to people. Because I mean, this does sound ridiculous. If you, when I first heard this from Pumi the other day, I was like, "What? This can't be real." So explain what it is, because we've just assumed everybody knows.
So it's basically a trend which we discussed. We thought may have started on TikTok, although TikTok did reach out to us, but it's just a trend where these kids get together.
Not us. It's not us. Yeah,
sure, it wasn't me.
Where do you think they find about this TikTok?
I don't know, but they were clearly listening. So basically, it's like a group of kids between, what would you say, the ages of like 17 to 21?
16.
16.
To 21. No, not to 21.
Not to 21.
These are little high
Younger.
school kids. Yeah, there's no 21-year-olds there. Imagine graduates being like Twizzies. It's little kids in high school. So from 16 to 18.
And they're kind of like on a forum or on like a group of sorts. And they know that they can come in numbers. And so what they do is they go from mall to mall around the country, and they just cause a lot of chaos. So like they'll just start running in the middle of the mall. People think there's like a shooting going on. So then the rest of the customers in the mall will kind of run with them, not paying bills, running out of the shops.
Even if they think they're being innocent and not causing any damage, and maybe they don't actually go out with the intention of causing damage, a huge crowd of people, especially a crowd of young people with all that energy and everything, they can cause trouble without even trying to cause trouble because it looks like a lot of people, and you know they can make a lot of noise. They can frighten a lot of. I mean, listen, this country's always on. Everyone in South Africa is always on the edge of our seat. We don't know what might happen next. This is a surefire way for these kids to get themselves hurt eventually, because someone's going to lose their shit and like attack them, and then they're going to attack the other person. You know, it's just going to be a mess. So we've got to like find a solution to this. What would you say is the best way to deal with this, Mash? If you were in charge of the mall, what would you do?
If I was in charge of the mall, I think the best way to the only way to deal with this actually would be to rather get the kids escorted, as the malls are doing currently, or just ban the kids altogether for a period of time. Just ban kids from the mall. You want something? Ask someone to get it for you. Ask your guardian.
It sounds like such an old way of doing things. Yeah, exactly. You sound like an old man, like ban the kids.
It is build a wall in the mall.
Like, what else are you going to do? Because, I mean, I feel sorry for these kids, because I do think it must be really tough to entertain yourself and to find things to do in modern society. If you live in a city and you don't have money like adults have, right? I mean, even if your parents give you pocket money, not all kids get that. And, you know, it's like it doesn't go as far as it used to. Like, what are you going to do unless your parents are completely spoiling you, in which case you have all kinds of options.
Which I think these Luh Twizzies are the kind of, I think Pumi mentioned that they were upper class kids.
Yeah. Well, their parents are usually wealthy, which opens a whole new can of worms. But let's just look at average kids in South Africa. They can't afford to go and like book a table at a restaurant. Plus, what restaurant's going to take a booking from like 16-year-olds seriously?
Yeah.
You know. So what do they do if they don't go to the mall? I mean, this is a legit question, and I don't want to hear from people who are like, oh, well, they should fucking stay at home, blah, blah, blah. If you're a kid and you live at home like most of the time, and on a Saturday you get the chance to not be at home, you don't want to sit at home waiting for something to happen. So where do you go? Where do you go? I mean, I remember as a kid at high school, we would go to each other's houses. And yes, sometimes I remember going to the mall. We'd go and watch movies, or we'd meet up there, or whatever. It was like a place outside of the house where you could actually see your friends. And it didn't happen often. It's not like my parents said every weekend you could do this, and I didn't have money. So what are you going to do?
Exactly.
And what's next? Are we going to start having like these fidelity security guards in movies with us, and like checking phones and... You know, like, are we going to get to that ridiculous point?
I think the best way to deal up with this, well, for starters, I go to the movies every Wednesday evening with my partner, and it's date nights. Every single Wednesday we go to the movies. And one thing I've noticed about the movies...
Wait, is it your date night, or do the movies have like that date night thing on Wednesdays?
No, it's our date night.
All right. Yeah.
So what we have noticed doing this every single week.
They have a routine. Wednesdays they do this. They're like an old married couple. Like, okay, so tonight we'll go to the movie, and then of course next Wednesday we'll also go to the movie, and the Wednesday after that, we'll go to the movie. Tuesdays is for restaurants, and
This week we
Thursdays you cook dinner for me.
We're going to use your vitality points to buy the tickets. Points, you're going to buy popcorn with your points. But one thing I noticed about going to the movies every single Wednesday with my partner is that they are empty. And I didn't realize this, but movies, the cinema has to play the movies all throughout the day on the circuit, whether there's people in there or not. So that's them losing money. So if these Latinos are going to come to the mall, they're going to actually buy movie tickets and fill up a cinema on a Tuesday afternoon.
They don't, though. They
don't?
just, according to what Pumi told me, again, like reports vary because we don't actually know a whole lot about this. And I'm not on TikTok, so I can't fucking get my head into this whole thing. But apparently they just get together, whole big crowd of them. They all hype each other up. It gets super noisy and like push everybody out of the way and like walk through the mall making a whole big racket. And, it's just like almost like a kind of a proto gang type thing. And then they start singing songs or making noises or whatever. And then they just as quickly are gone. That's what I understand. They don't spend money. They don't have a goal in mind. It's just like, let's get together, let's mob, and then we split.
Or you know what? We could just have announcements in the mall. The malls have speakers everywhere, always playing music.
No one listens to the speakers in the mall.
Well, somebody has to speak because these speakers are always playing trashy music. Rather someone. Yes.
The Twizzies, fuck off out of our mall.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't mind the Twizzies running in the corridors. They're not spending any money like the rest of you. They are just kids. They are upper middle class kids. They all have iPhones. They're all on TikTok. Please ignore them. Yeah. That's what you could possibly do.
It's also, what a shitty and embarrassing name, Luh Twizzies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound appetizing. It doesn't sound like something I would want to be called.
But guys, how weird it was just sitting there having breakfast and you got these like guards marching around. You're like, damn. This could happen at any time.
So bizarre. It's just so weird that you actually saw this happening. Because I mean, I've heard about it, but I honestly knew nothing until Pumi told me, and I feel so out of it. I'm like, where did I go to sleep like Rip Van Winkle, and I woke up like 100 years old? The whole world had fucking changed. So bizarre. So I mean, Sanela says here, you see, we were all young. We did this only on a lighter scale. These kids are not doing anything new. But much like everything else, they're just wilder. I'm at 2000 do everything to the extreme. Yeah, I mean,
you see, if there was, and I hate to sound like this as well, but if there was employment available for these kids to just go and work, there wouldn't be this kind of
employment.
You're not allowed to work until you're 16 or 18 anyway. So.
Yeah, but I mean, just those like casual jobs just to make a bit of money.
Yeah. What type of jobs?
These kids are not looking for work. Clearly, according to what we've heard already, they get lots of money from their parents because they dress to the nines. They've all got like fancy phones.
Yes,
so these are not like the children of hardworking domestic workers and people who are laborers and people who wake up at 4 a.m. and catch 3 taxis. These are people whose parents are like working, but in a middle-class job. They've got disposable income. They go to good schools. These are not like poor kids. Let's not get confused.
Can you imagine all the Ubers just coming in, dropping them off?
That's probably what happens. It's like it's Uber's Uber Black dropping them off,
Yes. There's a possible solution. So something happened in my complex quite recently. Last week, we actually, there was rumors going around. And my roommate actually told me this. She was like, yo, Wena, did you hear there's a snake on the loose in the complex? I was like, what do you mean? What the hell do you mean?
A snake in the complex.
Yeah, she's like, there's a snake on the
not
loose.
just you walking around with your dressing gown half open again. Then people are like, oh my God, there's the fucking python again.
Slithering down the corridors.
Oh, man.
No, so it was just going around the complex. Even the security were like, Mash, did you hear there might be a snake on the loose as I'm driving
Why
in?
are you still in this place, Mash? We've established this like weeks ago.
It sounds
you
like
need to get the hell out of there.
Where you live is like I've heard some crazy places and some funny neighbor stories, but I've never heard so many from one person. And I know you're not making it up. You just live in the weirdest fucking place in the country.
I certainly do. And this snake on the loose, everybody was talking about it. And my place is like intersections. One person says something, tells someone else, and then we all know. Because it turns out we all know each other. Out of all 5,000 whatever of us, just all seem to know each other. And it got to management, and management has been sending SMSs. Hey, we heard there's a snake on the loose. We're going to investigate, blah, blah, blah. I was like, investigate? You just made me more nervous. Whenever I hear the word investigation, it just makes me nervous.
No, can I tell you, I just picture some guy getting one of those Becky Taylor hats with like a smoke and then
to investigate for the snakes. Izinyoka.
I just pictured Inspector Gadget and like he's just looking for a snake in all the little crypts and crevices all over the complex. And as this rumor is going around, management started sending SMSs. It's cool. So I'm getting all these SMSs. Thank goodness I wasn't home. I was at my partner's house, and I'm getting all these SMSs. My roommate's also texting me like, yo, winner, they're still looking for the snake, but until they find it, I ain't going nowhere. I'm like, okay, so you're going to stay in the snake complex then instead of just leaving it.
I'm assuming this is on the ground floor, right?
I don't know. There was no specifics. They just said there is a snake on the loose, a python.
No. Is it a python?
Yes.
A python.
A damn python.
Why didn't you say you should have led with that?
I was nervous. I was like, girl, number one, don't sit on that damn toilet, because my worst fear has always been sitting on a toilet and having my butt bitten by a snake.
Or a scorpion.
A scorpion.
Oh, scorpions are worse.
No, rather a snake. Imagine a snake bites you with its mouth, okay? With its mouth on your ass. So this has been going around. And then finally, the other day, the complex sent an SMS saying that we've investigated and concluded that it was fake news. There was never a snake. There is no snake. And I thought to myself, then who started the damn fake news? Was it just the whispers?
Yeah, well,
one person said it?
Man, it's like those people who, when something's gonna happen in South Africa, then they send pictures of like 5 years ago when there were tires burning in the street, and they're like, look at this is happening right now in Centurion, you better stay away from this. And you find out it's total fake news, and you're like, why would someone make that up?
I always question videos that get sent to me that say forwarded many times.
Yes, that tells you a lot. It's just fear mongering.
Funnily enough, that is why they say that, is because if it's been forwarded many times, they want you to know that this could be bullshit that people are just sending because they like in on the action.
Right. Absolutely. And speaking of videos being sent many times, and some of the new features on WhatsApp is rumored to be introducing a new feature pretty soon. You guys know I'm all up in these apps and what's coming up next and all of that. And it's rumored. It's rumored. Nothing's confirmed yet. It is being rumored that WhatsApp is working on a new feature internally. People have been actually dissecting the code on the WhatsApp app and so forth, reverse engineering it. And they've noticed that there's some code that says live here and there, live activated, live deactivated. And people are now whispering saying WhatsApp is going to add a new feature that allows us to go live.
That's so annoying.
I want to find out from the audience, how is this something that people want?
No, stop it now. Why? I don't want to see people go live.
Oh, you can do this on
Instagram.
You can do it on YouTube. You can do it on Facebook. You can do it on TikTok. Why do we need to do this on WhatsApp as well? WhatsApp is a great messaging platform. Sometimes you don't want all the things to do all the things.
Absolutely.
It's like Zuckerberg can't think of anything original.
Nothing new. But I mean, even the idea of Facebook wasn't his idea. Remember, it was those two Was or whatever their names were. This guy is just like he's a copycat machine. And listen, he seems to do it faster and better than anyone else. So maybe his skill is like, 1,000 years ago, they would have called him like a con man or a copycat or something, whatever. Fact is, this guy doesn't have any original ideas.
No.
And he's just taking all the things that other apps do, and now he's forcing us to have that on WhatsApp. When are you ever going to Mash? Listen, out of all of us, you'll be the one to answer this.
Yeah.
Do you ever think you will use WhatsApp Live?
I'm going to use it. I'm going to be honest.
Why?
I'm going to go live
But what
as much
for?
as possible to show you guys what I'm up to. To show you guys
But
what
why
I'm up
don't
to
you
at the
do that on
moment.
TikTok or on Instagram now?
Because this, Joe,
What's the difference?
Because WhatsApp is more intimate. WhatsApp is people who I want to see this, as compared to TikTok, where it's just everywhere, just like 60,000 people.
But it's literally like your whole contact list.
Exactly. My contact list, it's going to be limited to them. So I want them to see that, oh, I am just busy squat hovering over the toilet right now, trying to avoid my ass being bitten by a snake. So the
don't go live doing that.
The intimate details is what I can share.
We're on your contact list. We don't want to be broadcast live with that shit. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, my contact list has spoken.
No, I'm really laughing at how like Zuckerberg is getting away with all the stuff now. Like, have you seen the new Instagram update? So now they've pulled back the retail part of Instagram so much now because they realized, oh shit, we were forcing our people who use the app to get into retail, start pushing businesses. They made like the main button where you normally post, like a retail part of the app where you can go and look and buy stuff.
Yeah, I remember.
Now they've pulled out completely, and it's a full creator platform again.
And I think they should have learned their lesson early on. As somebody who's been doing social media and stuff and marketing and for quite a while, people engage better. If I see a post, I see your outfit, or I see an outfit on Takealot's page or whatever, and I'm like, damn, that's a cute outfit, and I can tap on it, then decide to buy while I'm scrolling, I'm more likely to buy, as opposed to, hey, just shove it down my throat, add a whole tab just for me to shop. I don't want to shop when I'm going on Instagram.
That's the thing. And Gareth, like someone like you who rarely uses social media, that puts someone like you right off. Like you're right off social media if you do stuff like that.
So I noticed that, and it irritated me. I was like, what are you? It's a little shopping bag icon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I noticed it was like in the main list of things. I'm like, listen, I know what you guys are trying to do, but you're barking up the wrong tree. Not only do I go on there rarely for, and when I see that sort of stuff, it does put me off, but also we've got a million places to already spend money. What, you think I'm looking for a new place to spend money? The problem is not having money. It's not that you don't, if you had $1,000 every day that you could, you'd find a place to spend it. You're not sitting there going, oh, there's nothing to buy. Oh, there are no shops. Oh, there's nothing online. You'd be going ching, ching, ching if you had the cash lying around. The problem is we have no cash. That's the problem.
Exactly.
And now they've pulled it back completely, which makes me laugh because I'm like, you know what? You guys were quite innovative. And I know it wasn't Zuckerberg's team that started Instagram, but they were the first platform to do something like that was so different. And now they're pulling back to their roots originally. And now they're following Twitter's thing of paid verification as well. So
wait, what? Is that coming to Instagram?
It's already launched in the US.
What? How much does it cost?
Same money.
Like $200.
$8.
See, again, what is he doing? He's just copying other people.
No, because he realized Elon Musk was brilliant in the sense that, that's a money stream that it's constant.
Do you think it's Zuckerberg himself and he just has no shame? He's like, we'll just copy everyone else's stuff. Or do you think he's got a team of people and they all decide and he's like, well, I know they're going to blame me, but it's fine. We'll make lots of cash. How do you think it works?
The thing is, he is in panic mode, Gareth. Reason being, monetization has been a challenge for the entire Facebook group, Meta group, for quite a while now. For example, when Apple introduced device tracking and giving you the power to actually turn off tracking, disallow tracking for apps such as Facebook, apps such as Instagram, this sort of took away Meta's power to track you, therefore taking away their power to advertise to you accordingly. So the whole, I can talk about this on WhatsApp. I can just chat about Ferrero Rocher and then have Ferrero Rocher advertised to me on Instagram or on Facebook. They can't do that anymore. People are not allowing these apps to track them. So they're freaking out. And what happens when people freak out? They're like, okay, let's think of something quick, a quick fix to make money.
They make decisions.
Yeah. Well, so now they're like, okay, what can we do? And also WhatsApp has always been a challenge for them for quite a long time. Actually, ever since they bought WhatsApp, they've always been wondering, how can we make money off this platform? They don't make money from WhatsApp. They can't. Yeah. WhatsApp has no adverts. We are not paying for it. So trying to introduce features that will at some point make it viable for people to pay for WhatsApp is what they're trying to do. Let's say, Mesh is live. That means Mesh paid. Mesh has a blue tick on WhatsApp. Mesh paid. So that's next.
Mesh, calm down. You're going to have a heart attack.
It's all the running down, yeah.
It's just greed. Just greed.
Yeah.
It's just greed more than anything.
But I mean, he wasted like how many billions did he waste during lockdown trying to develop the metaverse that was just those avatars in the world?
No one wants to know. Listen, there was one of the big banks in South Africa paid, and I kid you not, because I heard from someone who was there, they paid tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of rand to build their own metaverse. One of the big banks, right? Who one of us might bank at. These motherfuckers. They went and spent, I don't know how much it was. It was between, I think the guy said between 80 and 120 million rand on developing their own metaverse. And it was a total flop. Even the people who were invited to the opening party were like, this is some bullshit. And they spent all that customer money on this nonsense. You know how embarrassing that is? And you got companies, and they say to me, they're like, oh, well, we don't know if we should be reaching your audience. And I'm like, are you kidding? Our audience are the smartest people in South Africa. They're very picky about what they listen to. They don't. They tell me when the show's shit because they're not going to come back. These are the most discerning people in South Africa. They're not listening to radio or watching TV. You can't get them anywhere else. If you want to reach these ears of these people who listen to us, here's how much it's going to cost you. They're like, oh, I don't know about that. But they'll spend 80 million rand at a minimum to build the fucking stupid metaverse that none of their customers is on. Not one. Dummy.
Name and shame, Gareth. Name and shame.
No, we're not about to do that.
Nikita says, back to Mash's story, one of my biggest fears is a snake attacking my sensitive bits while I'm on the toilet, or even a jumping spider. Ooh, spoiled for choice between the options of dark, moist orifices in view.
Spoiled for choice.
That is horrible.
Oh, Nikita.
Shame, Nikita. That's horrible. That is a bad, nasty nightmare that's just waiting to come out. Oh no, the poor influencers are going to have to find real jobs now. How sad.
How sad. It is quite terrible, quite saddening. But you know what? On to lighter stuff. There is an audio, actually, a video that's been trending on TikTok over the past week that I'd like to actually share with the audience. It's quite a light-hearted video, but you know Twitter, you know social media, they have a way of turning things on their heads. So this video is of a woman. Her name is Madlamini. She's been trending quite a bit on TikTok, and she is just a vibe. It's just her just talking. I think she's like homeless or something, and she's just drunk and she doesn't care a damn. Oh, no. And she's just walking on the street. She's like, Bona, I don't care, damn. And I love her. I love her. She's such a vibe. And yeah, let's go straight to it.
Let's go. Let's hear it.
Should be up. Is it up?
Oh, have I got to play it? Why didn't you say so? All right, here's Madlami. Here we go.
You answer my question, yeah.
So now this audio forever, yeah.
I like her a lot.
I've been saying it every time I say goodbye to people. I'm like, forever, yeah. And now this audio is being utilized for Nandipa, Dr. Nandipa, Thabo Besta's girlfriend, and or wife rather, and people are using captions such as
Is it wife?
They're customarily married. She did claim the body from the body from the G4S prison. And they're saying that when people ask Dr. Nandipa, why would you do this, Dr. Nandipa? Why would you put your reputation on the line? And then her response is forever yena, which basically means forever him or her. It's actually not, there's no gender to it, but forever him.
Is this what we're going to say from now on?
That's the new thing. Forever yena. So whenever people question any bad decision you have made, forever yena. Our politicians, why do we still have load shedding? Why are things not working? Why aren't you guys reporting each other? You guys know who's doing the corruption. You're all in the same little rooms and same little WhatsApp groups. You know who's doing the corruption up in here. Why can't you guys expose each other? Because forever yena.
Exactly.
That is why.
That's it. All right, I like this. This is good. We've got a new catchphrase. Thanks to Matlamini. Where did they find her? It looks like she comes from some dusty ass, grimy ass. Like she hasn't had a wash in like 14 years. Where's Matlamini from? Do we know anything about her?
We don't know much about her, but there's actually multiple videos of her just talking, and people just love recording her. She's always by the taxi rank, and she's like, forever yena.
This reminds me of that video that we used in December when it's like, December.
Yeah.
Amazing how these people can become overnight celebrities with like a little catchphrase or a thing that they say. There's this guy that I follow on Instagram. He is called the Queen of Scotty Road. He's like from Liverpool. And he's got a real Liverpool accent sort of thing. And he's like over the top, flamboyant, like gay, and he wears these outfits and he's like always dressed to the nines, and he's always like hanging around somewhere in Liverpool. Scotty Road is the main road in Liverpool. And he's got this thing. So whenever the camera comes up to him, he's always rude to everybody. So he's like, "What do you want? Who are you? Why are you talking to me?" kind of thing. And he always finishes every sentence or every like clip. He goes, "You know what I always say? Times are hard and friends are few. Ta-da to fucking you." And he pisses off. I'm like, and it's so goddamn stupid, but it's so entertaining. Like, I always watch this stuff. So it's like Madlamini, like forever yena.
I see Snaya says here in the comments, Madlams is a vibe. She's from what's that place? Ngwelezane in Empangeni. People love her. They buy her food and give her money. She is a vibe. Wow. She's absolutely a vibe.
She's a celebrity.
People always celebrity.
Go, there are no real celebrities. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the real celebrities are dusty old Madlamini. I mean, like that's what you got.
And I'm like, does she know she's a celebrity? Because all these videos of her are from people just taking videos of her at the taxi rank. I don't think she even knows she's a celebrity.
Have you seen? There's a guy I follow. He's also, I think he's in Durban. They call him Mr. Maharaj, and people also film him everywhere. And now I don't know I think he hates it now, but so many people would film him just to put it on TikTok. They would try to find him and give him money. And then he'd be like, he used to say things like, you know, I love this country because I can walk here, I can walk there, but people sit in their house, they sit at work, they sit everywhere. You need to walk. And like, but now I think he's so put off because everybody just puts the camera on him as soon as they see him. I don't know. Have you seen that guy?
I've seen that guy.
Yeah,
I'm actually watching his video now. He is an absolute vibe.
What's his name?
Mr. Maharaj.
Mr. Maharaj, yeah.
An absolute vibe.
Why I like that, why I think people like that are so great on social media is because they don't want to be famous. Like I don't think this guy or Madlamini, I mean, they both look like they standard people. Like these are not people who've dressed up for the cameras or waited.
Absolutely.
They're not like trying to check which angle is the best angle on them. They don't care about how many likes they get. In fact, other people are filming them. So they're not interested in being famous themselves. And I think that's what people are after, because the most valuable commodity in the world, we've discussed this 1,000 times, is going to eventually be privacy. People are going to be like, the less we know about you, the more mysterious and interesting you are, you know? The more like people want to know, because they've never heard of you, and they're like, oh, but I heard about this person, and this is all we know. It's not a lot, but this person seems really interesting.
And also to be yourself, you know. There's no one
Always.
quite like these individualistic people who are just, they're not putting on an act or anything.
I want to watch Matlamini one more time. Just hold on a second.
Forever, yeah. Forever, yeah. You answer my question, yeah.
You answer my question, yeah. Nah.
She walks like this. She's kind of, like unsteady on her feet. She does look like a dusty, grimy old lady. That. Jesus.
She's like, if I get a man with a car forever, yeah. Nah.
And
I
that
love it.
guy, I mean, that's the other guy, right? Congo Chris reminded me. I'm never last. Only tough people last.
Oh, I love that guy. Yeah. But I see Cliff Centralist is also talking about a guy named Bonga. Now, I met this guy, right?
What?
So yeah, there's a homeless guy named Bonga. He used to stand by the robot where I used to study, and I didn't hate him, but I used to hate it when he came up to my window because I hated giving money out. Like in the beginning when I went to college, I used to give money to all these people, and then you realize that you can't help everyone, and you're just draining yourself completely. So I stopped giving money out to people.
You'll be completely bankrupt in like a week.
Exactly.
Yes.
People in South Africa who need your money.
And I'll never forget. So this Bonga guy, he's actually getting a lot of voiceover work, and people are actually employing him now. And he seems quite popular on TikTok as well. But I'll never forget the one morning, he came up to my window, and I was so frustrated. I was like, "I'm sorry, dude. I really don't have any money to give you." And then he pulled the 2 rand out and gave it to me because I had no money. I was like, that's not what I meant, but I appreciate the humor.
Only in South Africa.
He's like, yeah, you need it more than I do. I was like, oh my God.
We've only got 15 minutes left of this hour. I just want to quickly solve a problem because Lebang was complaining yesterday about her Tupperware problem after all her relatives were all staying with her and they all came to visit her. It sounded like there was absolute pandemonium at her house yesterday. It was just like 1,000 fucking people. And she was saying, oh, it's so nice to have the family. But you could tell she was also stressed beyond belief. I mean, she's already got the 5 kids. Now she's got, 100 in-laws visiting her. And they've just to feed the whole lot of them. And they're all staying in her house. I mean, it must have been just awful. So not my idea of fun. But she was saying that all her Tupperwares went missing. She couldn't even pack a little scuff tin yesterday for work. And MASH apparently has a solution to this.
Yes, it's very simple. Very, very simple. So I was telling Lebang that Bonane, you have to hide everything whenever guests come. You have to hide all the Tupperware. No, it's a real thing in Black households, Gareth. Whenever there's visitors coming over, we actually spend like an hour just hiding all the Tupperware. We'll put it either in the boot of the car or in under the bed, because we do have those beds that open up and all of that. You have to hide all the Tupperware when you have visitors. And I was like, Lebang, you should know this. As a Black mom, you should know that Bona Tupperware is hidden always. And and when I say Tupperware, I don't just mean the good shit, like the ones that says Tupperware. I mean all of it. Everything.
You mean like those ice cream containers?
No, you hide everything except the ice cream containers.
Right.
So the ice cream containers should be what people take food home with. Ice cream containers, and also those plastic ones. You know the plastic containers that you get whenever you buy a salad at Woolies or whatever.
Yes.
So one thing I learned from my mother is keep those. After eating your salads, keep them. So that if people ever want to take takeaways, you just take one, pop it open, put the takeaways, whatever, their food in there, and then they can fuck off. And you'll never see them again with that. As opposed to using your expensive. And the thing is, if you bought it, you have to hide it. That's the golden rule. So whenever you're hosting anyone going forward, remember, hide all your plastic containers, whether it's Tupperware, whether it's what. I don't care if you have 10,000 cupboards. Find a place to hide. Even dig it up in the garden if you have to. Put in a black plastic bag and dig it up.
Chiara Bilwe says, Lebang did it to herself. Whenever relatives leave, you check their bags. It's a black thing. Jesus, you take Smash. They continue. Margarine and ice cream scuff-tins are game. That's fine.
Yes.
Margarine, ice cream. Yeah, okay.
That is the way. So when Lebang was telling me, I took Lebang home yesterday, and as we were driving, I was like, Lebang, how dare you? How dare you not hide the Tupper? How dare you not hide all the plastic containers in your house? Now you're going to complain, and you know you're never going to get them back. These people went to Mpumalanga. You're not getting that back.
Mo Dollars says, I knew this was going to happen to Lebang the other day. She was bragging about her love for her extended family. People take advantage. Carl says, how uncouth is your family? Your family that you need to hide your shit away. I had a cousin who was a drug addict, and we had to hide stuff because he'd steal it for drugs.
Oh my gosh. No, it's not family.
I spend my time like unpacking stuff because I hide stuff away, and I'm like, when our family come over, they've bought me stuff. And I'm like, I need to put it back so that they can see that I'm using it, or like, you know.
Snai says you can pack doggy bags for your visitors. Dodgy, it obviously spelled auto-corrected. For your visitors yourself, or buy those aluminium salad containers from the shop. You also don't have any of that if you just wrap stuff up with cling wrap. It's fine.
Wait, hold on a second. So you guys take doggy bags from Bryce?
From Bryce?
Yeah.
You always take a doggy bag. You always take a doggy bag from a Bryce. What do you mean?
Maybe it's just an unspoken rule, but like every Bry I go to, we leave the food, like pretty much most of what you bought, at that person's house. Whoever hosted.
Why would you do that? What are they going to do with that food?
I don't know. Just
exactly. That's why you must take it, because you don't know what they're going to do with it.
That's very odd to me.
No.
That's very different to what I do.
I always have Tupperware in my boot so that wherever I go.
Wherever I go.
I know, Bona. No, it's a must. It's a must. I even told my partner, Bona, love, you have to always keep Tupperware in your boot.
So this is really how Matthew Booth really got outed because of that, hey? So people really know their Tupperware.
Yes, people really know their Tupperware. I can see my own Tupperware from a mile away. From a mile. I went to my partner's house. I had one Tupperware I had left there, and I opened the Tupperware cupboard. I thought, this is my Tupperware. This one, this pink one underneath the others. That's my Tupperware.
Do you label yours?
I don't label it. I can just tell. My Tupperware is, so my mother sells Tupperware. So I always get the new ones, the new ranges that nobody has yet, the exclusives.
No wonder you hide yours, so you get good stuff. You don't get shit stuff.
I got the good shit. So I have to hide it all the time. And honestly, it is an unspoken rule. And going forward, please, people, do the same. And also carry Tupperwares in the boot of your car, in case you ever need to take a salad home, take some food home. Maybe you have kids at home, you know. Sometimes you went to a braai for adults and kids weren't allowed, and your poor kids are at home eating Morvite or something.
I'm just hoping that you don't take more than what you brought at a braai.
I didn't bring anything, but I did contribute.
What do you guys do the cash thing?
Yeah. Even if I was invited to a braai, I'll take. Because it is an unspoken thing.
This is very valuable information. People need to know this stuff. So thank you, Mash.
Yes. So going forward, please stock up on plastic containers, stock up on even takeaway containers as well in your home, because you never know when people are going to come through. And the thing is, nobody will talk to you. They'll just dish themselves in the Tupperware. They'll just open a cupboard. Oh, a nice big green Tupperware. Let me just put in here and go home so my kids can eat. And meanwhile, that Tupperware was like $300. Who's going to give you $300 in this economy?
I figured that out because
Carl says, Mash, keeping Tupperware in your boot is very low class. Sandile says, Mash gets Tupperware 14 Pro Max.
Well, thanks to my ma'am. If you guys want Tupperware, just hit me up. I'll connect you to my ma'am so you can actually get some really dope Tupperware.
I was cucked out the other day because I warmed up food in the Tupperware, and I was told that if you warm it up, it burns. It like messes up the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I figured that out.
Don't you dare warm food in my Tupperware.
Jason said my mom would write her name in permanent marker and double check people's bags to make sure. So you see, it's not just black people then.
It's not. My mother scratches our surname into the Tupperware. She just scratches our surname. Says Sifuti underneath everything.
Cliff Central says Gareth was correct earlier. Mash is out here sounding old as fuck. Tupperware is an old ladies' game. I don't know. I think everybody in the whole world of every age needs to have I mean, you think about it. School kids, they use Tupperwares for their lunchboxes. No.
So I suppose you'd get lost in a Westpac, eh, Mash?
Oh, well, it's my favorite shop. I just spend hours there. I spend hours. I buy Ziploc bags. I buy containers. I buy those stickers. That's where I get them. So yeah, Westpac lifestyle. That's the lifestyle we're at now. So please, guys, and hey, King, you must talk to Westpac.
My God. So Yonda says, Brian, most of my friends and family gatherings, I'm the braai master and never end up eating. So I pack away and I leave the place. And most people bring a lot, so they take home afterwards. Yeah, I reckon, look, if I have people around for a braai, I will always offer people the option of taking like a scufftina away afterwards. But it's kind of, if they
pain
ask,
in the ass.
It's a pain in the backside. Because then what do you also, like Mash and Lebang have already said, what do you put it in? And then you give them like some container that you need. And before you know it, it's no longer yours. You've got no chance. You've got no chance. The problem is something like a Tupperware is never coming back to you.
It's never. And the thing is, sometimes the people taking the Tupperware have the exact same Tupperware. So you ask for it back, they're like, I've always had 3.
I heard the show yesterday, and I just thought to myself, I was like, this is a problem I've never had to think about. This is why I found it like fascinating.
All you have to I'll call my mom, ne? Let's get you some Tupperware, Ryan. Let's get you some Tupperware up in that boot.
Keep it in the back of my car.
So you can actually experience this for yourself.
Is she like an agent for them? Does she have the whole catalog and then people order from her and she gets them? Okay, wow.
Yes, my mom is. She's one of the agents. And yeah, hey, she hooks me up for real with the good stuff.
Here's a panic thing. Sharon says she heard Tupperware is bankrupt and are closing down. Oi, that's going to send people into shock.
More reason to buy more because it's going to be worth more once it's shut down. More reason to contact me so I can contact my mother.
We need people, says Congo Chris, to steal Tupperware so that the Tupperware addicts buy more. Stealing Tupperware keeps the Tupperware economy going. Viva la Tuppies, viva. Oh my God.
So it's a whole business, huh?
What an amazing show. We've gone from like Luh Twizzies to Tupperware.
To La Tuppies.
I found out about Bonga. I found out about Madlamini. Oh my God.
Maharaj Alostro. I'll try to get a video of Maharaj for next week.
Please. I love these people. I love them. And that's the new level of celebrity. That is the new celebrity we have in this country. And I love it. It's regular people who don't even know they're famous.
I think that's awesome. I'd much rather be following people like that than I would be following people who are trying to be famous.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's crazy out there.
All right. We've got to wrap up this hour. We've got an amazing, amazing interview. It's one of my favorite conversations I've had all year. It's not the first time I've interviewed this guy, but oh man, is he fucking fantastic. Let me just show you this book. This is, you need like 2 hands to hold this book. This is his book. Look how fat.
How many pages are Gareth?
I'm sure 600.
Oh my God. Hang on,
I'd love to actually know the exact amount of pages. That is ridiculous.
1,239.
And you read it all?
I read this book over December, and it is the most awesome book. It is all about people in history that you may or may not have heard of. They're obviously the people you have, but they're all kinds of stories about, the families, the children, the women, the wives. It is fascinating stuff. And Simon Sebag Montefiore, who is the historian who wrote this book, was in South Africa a short while ago. I remember the first time we spoke to him was when Anthony Mederer and I were doing season 6 of Blind History, and he was like a special guest on one of our bonus episodes. And he was in his office in London, and he had just started writing this book. And we had, 45 minutes talking to him. Anyway, he came to South Africa and he did a lecture at the Brenthurst Library, which I went to, in which he explained some of the reasons he did the book and some of the stories from the book. And it was fantastic. I mean, I was the youngest person there by 20 years because everybody else was like gray, and they walked with sticks and shit. But I loved it. It was the best Friday night I've had, and I'm including all the ones where I've been drinking with friends and everything else. This was one of the most fun nights of my life. And this guy has a way of doing history, which is just, I marvel at this. The ability to take in like 1,000 books and condense it into one. The ability to take 20,000 stories and condense it into one book is just such a talent. And he's so good at this stuff. And from the first chapter to the very last, you will be captivated by this thing. I can't tell you what a great book it is. Anyway,
what's it called? Sorry, I see there's people asking.
It's called The World, A Family History by Simon Sebag Montefiore. He's my guest in the next hour. I'm absolutely sure you're going to love it. I've been waiting to play this for you. It's we had some other stuff we had to put in before, but we've got to it today. So I'm very excited to bring this to you. By the way, we will be interviewing Michael Jordan, who's been a tremendously successful South African businessman. We'll talk to him, and you'll be able to hear that episode soon. Also, another historian guy called John Lebang, who's written an amazing book about the Zulu Boer Wars of 1837 to 1840. Really interesting guy too. And there's a bunch of other cool stuff. So, I mean, I don't want to jump the gun and give away too much, but we're trying to get you really interesting people so that you can hear all the great stories. And Slippery Pickle's asking, speaking of that, where is the blind history? Well, had a meeting, was it last week? Last week, I think. Anthony popped in. He was in from Cape Town. And we had a discussion about things. And we are looking at launching a different version of blind history. But we are talking about it, so don't panic. There will be something there very, very soon. So stick around for that and a whole lot more. Someone says here, what's the title? And then someone else says, he used Chat GPT. No, I don't think so. You have to put in long-ass questions to get that going. Anyway, I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. I'm sure you will love this interview that's coming up next. Stick around for that and a whole lot more. Mash and Ryan and I will catch up with you next Wednesday, but I'll be back tomorrow morning for more. Tomorrow's Thursday, so Pumi's back in the seat, and don't miss that. Check you later.
Forever, yeah.
Every time you listen to that 80s show, Tom Cruise lives another 10 years. Every Friday on CliffCentral.com, Paolo and Dory review movies, reminisce about old songs, remember childhood places that are now car parks, and say some outrageously rude things about Patrick Swayze's brother. That 80s show, new episode every Friday, live or as a podcast on CliffCentral.com.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast,
Ever.
definitely going to see an electric future. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's not say even more likely. We're definitely going to see an electric future. It's just a matter of how fast that's going to be, as you pointed out.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I'm saying 2045 in South Africa. The tipping point is going to be anywhere in the 2040s. Just because I just don't see government regulation changing fast enough.
Yeah.
To incentivize electric vehicles in the country at mass or at scale.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm wrong. I want to sit here next year and say it's not
No, we're wrong.
2040,
Yeah.
it's 2035.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know. Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Okay, that is correct. Auto Trader is back with a brand new show this week, and George will be on the show on Friday. And speaking of that, a quick message here from KB, who says, consider a tech version of Blind History with Aki, also one with cars, with Borge. Well, we're going to do, we were talking yesterday to somebody who's been on the show before, Brett, who runs a gas company, and we're talking to him about putting a show together, which I think will be really interesting. He's got some unbelievable interests, and he's got opinions on all kinds of things which I think need airing. So we may have Brett joining our little lineup of dangerous people here on cliffcentral.com very soon. So we'll keep you in the loop about that. But obviously, if you come up with any good ideas, or you can think of anything, or you want to suggest anything to us, you can do that. Just send me an email, Gareth@cliffcentral.com, and I will take care of it. I reply to all of them. All right. Here we go. After a morning of talking nonsense about Tupperware and the Tweezies, it's time to talk about something really profound, and that is the history of humanity. No small subject, obviously. The guy who we to take us on this journey is a guy called Simon Sebag Montefiore, who is an extraordinary historian and someone who's put together a proper magnum opus of work, The World. So here is a discussion that he and I had. I think what you're going to enjoy about this is that it's not all serious. A lot of it is about, kind of who would you most like to meet if you could go back in time? Where in the world would you want to be at what time in order to see some huge cataclysmic event take place? What do you think is the most valuable artifact in history? These are the kinds of things that we talked about. So just two history nerds having fun. Hope you enjoy it. Take a listen to this and let us know what you think. So this is the absolutely astonishing volume, which I've spoken about to the author before. He is the incredibly talented and ambitious Simon Sebag Montefiore. I say ambitious only because of the scope of this work. You looked at me almost as if I was being, like Caesar was ambitious in Brutus's speech.
Yes.
Here he is. He's this time in South Africa, I'm very pleased to say. And he's in our studio today. Simon, it's a great pleasure to meet you in person.
It's great to meet you in person. We've talked before.
We have.
And I think what you do is great, by the way. And I love the podcast. I love the way you do it. So great to be here in reality.
Well, I mean, first of all, we've got to mention to people that The World is still available. I've seen it in all good bookstores, and it is colorful beyond measure. It's beautifully designed, and it also contains some of the most wonderful stories from history. I think it's a great introduction to people who are massive history buffs, and also to those who are total novices to history. It could be the greatest introduction.
That's the idea. I mean, the idea is it's based in scholarship, but it can be read by anybody. You don't have to know anything, and you don't have to start at the beginning. You can start in the middle, or read it backwards.
Well, I want to ask you about that, because you've made an incredible career and life out of studying history and telling those stories to the rest of us. And it seems to me that with the democratization of the internet and everything else, that there are a lot of people who fancy themselves historians. Do you think it's still massively important for those credentials to be a part of it, and for you to distinguish between the amateur historian and the professional historian, in your case, the professional one?
Well, I don't believe in sort of professional versus amateur. I mean, I think it's really like you have to win the trust of readers that it's all about judgment. And I think anyone who writes history is a historian. But I think, obviously, the internet is an amazing reservoir, or can be an amazing reservoir of facts and knowledge, but it's also a charter for ignoramuses and pub bores to lecture people pedantically on things they know nothing about. and it's just a matter of differentiating between those two types. And actually, I think that anyone who says they're a historian is a historian.
There are those elements of history which are propagandistic, and we know that he who controls the story, these days they talk about the narrative in politics, but those people have largely guided the way that history's been understood for many generations. And by those people, I mean, Augustus famously had his press corps. Alexander the Great went through the known world at that point with his fan club, writing down much of the story. You could call it propaganda, but thank God that they did. Otherwise, we might not have known any of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, all rulers have tried to control the narrative. And, and throughout history, ideology has tried to control and straitjacket the writing of history. And, the historian's duty is really not to be a polemicist and an ideologist. But to try and get as close to the truth as possible. Now that's a big ask, and we've got to show humility in the fact that we can't always get close to it. Much of it is a matter of judgment. History is not a pure discipline like physics or something,
right?
Or mathematics. It's always a mixture between judgment, scholarship. It involves a lot of statistics and data. And it involves a lot of imagination, and it's about writing. So it's a mixture of so many disciplines, and one tries to put it all together. I mean, nowadays it's brilliant because we've got all these new, genetics, for example. We've got these new scientific advances that make history even more interesting and complex. But the key thing is, to reject the old ideologies, but not just embrace the new ones, which are just as distorting. So it is a big challenge. And in the world, I try to balance these really complex things while also writing a book that's accessible to everybody. And also much of writing history today is about, and this has probably always been so, is about overcoming the petty obsessions of the present. And if one would write much better history if one didn't have the present. The baggage of the present at all. But of course, we're all the part of the present. And many of the things that make the world what it is, in my book, I mean, are things that are very much of the present and are very positive. I mean, for example, the diversity, having Africa.
Women, for a start.
Women, yeah. Africa. I mean, since we're sitting here in Joburg, Africa, this is the most African world history ever written. And, one of the great joys of writing it was writing about Africa, not just South Africa, but Southern Africa, North Africa, the Maghreb, West Africa, and East Africa, where, which few people study actually, and more people should know about. So that's one of the joys of it. Then women, as you say, Cliff, which is, again, neglected. But this book is filled with women. And then, of course, covering things that are very, very of the moment, interests and obsessions of the moment, like slavery.
So there is this very difficult balancing act that has to be performed, where you want to be close enough to the history to be able to have reliable sources. It's easier to write about the 1800s than it is about ancient Greece,
correct,
for example. But you also don't want to be so far away from it. I mean, you need a bit of distance, as you point out, about the present. Otherwise, it can get very confusing because it starts to be colored by present day experiences. What do you think there's an ideal point for the historian, a vantage point for the historian to be at?
Yeah, but defining it is almost impossible. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it needs to be, because it's sort of storytelling and it has to be colorful, it has to be exciting. And why? Because life is like that. Life is exciting and colorful and filled with extraordinary characters. But you also have to step back from life to analyze it and see the meaning of all of this. So you don't just. I mean, journalism is often described as the first draft of history, but actually it isn't. It's not even that. I mean, journalism really does reflect the sort of the Twitter frenzy of the day.
Oh yeah.
And the Twitter frenzy of the day. The interesting thing about the internet, because we all have to live now with the internet, and the internet is so important in history in some ways. But the problem with it is, and the strange thing about it is that people are in a kind of fury, a rage on one day. You know, they are literally writing the most vituperative things. They're screaming, they're accusing people of God knows what. A week later, 10 days later, they're thinking slightly the better of it, but they feel no reason to explain what they did 10 days earlier. And 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, they've completely forgotten about it and moved on to something else.
Absolutely.
You know, so I think
So maybe they should have a little compassion for the historian.
Well, they should have a little compassion for whoever it is whatever it is they're writing about, because Twitter is very transient. The rages of Twitter, the rages and furies of Twitter are very transient.
So I want to pick up where we left off last time. You won't remember, but I made a mental note of this, thinking and hoping that we'd meet again. You finished writing your book on the day of the invasion of the Ukraine.
Correct.
And when we spoke about this, already much had happened, which could have been an addendum to the book. And I was just curious, in the last 5 months or so, whether any of these stories have changed so significantly that you feel that perhaps this is exactly what we were talking about, the example of history moving in real time and being able to figure it out from the right vantage point. Do you think we've got any more clarity on what's going on here? Or are you pretty much sure that your original suppositions were correct?
I mean, actually, fun enough, I've just been updating the conclusion for the paperback, because it's going to come out, you know, later in the year. But, you know, basically, I stand by what I wrote in the conclusion, because the way it's structured is it ends on as you said it correctly, it ends on the day of the invasion. And even when I wrote it, it was clear that the Ukrainians had defeated the Russian advance on Kiev. But I finished the book, the main part of the book, on a sort of cliffhanger saying, you know, the Russians invaded, ... But the conclusion takes the book really forward, you know, for the next 50, 100 years, and encompassing what's happened so far. But I mean, all sorts of extraordinary things have happened since we spoke last.
Yeah, I mean, just this week we've had Xi and Putin get together and sign all kinds of treaties that will ensure that their sovereignty is supported by the other. Includes Taiwan, it includes other parts of the former Soviet Union, which Vladimir Putin is laying claim to. It involves currencies. It involves almost a new world order of some kind. And I don't want to sound like one of these conspiracy theorists, but you know, India is a big part of this too.
Yes,
they've been very carefully neutral.
I've been in India since I last saw you,
and
since we last spoke. Well, it's very fascinating. I mean, you just realise that there are huge parts of the world that don't buy into the our democratic narrative of what's happening in Ukraine. They see things differently, and their criteria for judging this is not just whether there's a good democracy there or not, whether the people don't want to live under Russian control. They're looking at things in a much more geopolitical way, and of course they're very affected by their vision of imperial history.
Right.
You know. Which is slightly sort of wrong in the sense that, of course, you know, Russia nowhere has a history of imperialism like Russia. So, but there's this sort of great hostility to the Western American narrative. And I guess what we're really seeing is, which you see throughout the book, is, you know, the problem of being the prime power. You know, it happened with, for example, the Spanish Empire. You know, in the sort of 15th, 16th centuries, the Spanish Empire was the greatest empire on earth, and of course, being the tallest poppy, the fattest poppy too.
Yeah. Hegemony only lasts so long.
Yeah, and there are real problems with being the hegemon. One is that, you know, you have to keep on there's no end to being the hegemon. You have to keep on taking on new responsibilities, which you can't afford and you don't want to afford, but you have to do it to stop somebody else getting to them. If you don't do that, someone else steps in. And we've seen that, you know, with the Obama, what you might call the Obama doctrine, which is like, don't do anything stupid, let's step back. Well, actually, that doesn't really work, because if you step back, somebody else steps in.
Correct.
And the other part of it is, when you are the top hegemon, you know, everyone wants to, you're the one to bring down.
Correct.
You know, so that's another thing. Everyone reacts against you. And we saw that with Spain, for example. You know, the Dutch and the British really, really rebounded in the wars against Spain. And Spain, the wars against Spain really provided them with their kind of with their momentum to become great powers, which South Africa particularly experienced. Not just South Africa, but many parts of Africa.
Oh yeah,
because there were so many wars between
and then of course the New World.
And the New World.
And Britain was a great heir to the destruction of Spain.
Yes. I mean, the Dutch sort of made the first attempt, to get hold of it. And, that really, of course, that involved you guys down here. But there was also, they tried to grab West Africa. They tried to, they had New York, New Amsterdam and all that. They tried to seize Brazil from the Portuguese, because the Portuguese and Spanish crowns were then united. And they overreached. They were kind of defeated by the British, the English as it was then, and then the English became the real heirs to the Spanish Empire.
But you've got to admire that pluckiness of the Dutch, and you can even see it now. I mean, there was an
Sea
election.
beggars.
Oh yeah, and this tiny little piece of land which just completely outperforms on almost every scale. It's really quite something.
Well, you realise that empire is really a kind of it's a psychological state of mind, because these countries, the Dutch and the English, are tiny, really.
Yeah.
And they take on the whole world through confidence, energy, ingenuity, creativity. Empire is rightly questioned and out of fashion now, but actually, it's really just there should be less of a fetish about it. It's just a fact of government and statehood.
You also mentioned something just now, which I think is also quite relevant. When people think of empire, they tend to think especially of the most recent Western empires, of kind of, the American, British before that, and so on. But empire has been a fact of civilization since ancient Persia and Egypt.
Yeah, I mean,
and you could argue it's always been the goal of states to become empires.
Yes. I mean, empires, states have always been states with mass, in population and scale and geographical scale. That's essential for power, ultimately, first of all. And secondly, those states are always likely to dominate other peoples around them and further afield. And so, empire is just a word for the natural expansion of powerful states. We just think of the British High Empire, and everyone, of course, in history, everyone's still reacting against the British power.
And before that, it was Rome. I mean, we could argue that pretty much most of European history post the fall of Rome was aspiring to recreate what, at its apogee, what ancient Rome might have been.
Oh yeah, because even sort of when you look at the Umayyads, for example, the caliphs who ruled the whole Arab Empire from Damascus, they were Muslim, but they were really kind of channeling Roman. They lived like Roman emperors,
and we owe them a great debt of gratitude for having kept so much of ancient Greek and ancient Roman literature and philosophy alive during a period in the Dark Ages where Western Europe was really quite retrograde.
Yeah, but that's quite a sort of, people always say that. Of course, they've forgotten that, the Byzantine Empire and Constantinople existed throughout this period, right up until 1453, as everybody knows. And of course, they had all the Greek literature there. So in fact, because one reads again and again in Western history books that, we owe everything to the Arabs of the Abbasids and the House of Wisdom. But actually, they were translating something that was readily available in Constantinople at any point.
You make a very good point. I was in Istanbul for the first time in October last year.
Just amazing, isn't it?
Oh, what a place! And to see something like that serpentine column in the Hippodrome, and to imagine that the bronze that's made of was bronze that was melted down from shields and supposedly swords from the Battle of Salamis.
Wow!
And that it was originally kept near the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, the Delphic Oracle. I mean, this is a chain of history which is it gives you goosebumps.
Yeah. I mean, these things are so fascinating. And, Constantine, I just love Constantine. I made a BBC series about it once. And
I may have seen it.
You may have seen it.
You may have been my research before going to Istanbul.
Well, it was just a joy. I had such a wonderful, sort of 10 years of making these BBC series. And it was just lovely living in these great, and the joy of it was living in great cities for sort of a couple of months. That's why I did them, really.
Well, let me ask you then, because I think we're two history nerds, and the people who are going to really take interest in this are going to be the people who want to know all of this detail, which maybe other people would think is uninteresting. But out of all the places you've visited, where are you most desperate to go again and again and again? Because there's just such a richness of history to be exploited, or things that you want to see, things that just keep that love for the subject alive.
Well, I love Constantinople, but the places I really want to go are in Iran.
I couldn't agree more.
And in Iran, the problem is, I don't know. I don't think I'd last long in Iran at the moment. So I think probably better not to go.
Also, they're not very keen on people with British passports.
British
and
passports,
American,
and
But to go to Persepolis, Pasargadae.
Yeah. I mean, in the book, I mean, I've sort of, Persia is so important. Iran is so important, and Persia, and
well, you start with Akkad, Sargon of Akkad.
That's right.
And to go back to the book, I mean, what's amazing about this is you don't just tell the story of Sargon, which is, it's we've got only a little bit of information. It's been overplayed, but this is where the imagination kicks in.
Yeah.
And you talk more about the family, and you talk more about his daughter, and you talk about that aspect of what it must have been like to live at that time.
Well, Enda Juana is like a fascinating character, the daughter.
Yes.
Because, we know very little about her. She may not have been, she's very unlikely to have been the authoress of all the things, all the works ascribed to her. But she really is the first sort of princess we really know in person, the first named authoress we know in person, the first person who's sort of a survivor of sexual abuse that we know in person, and the first person who wrote about it. So that's why I started the book with her, because when I sort of studied her, I realized this person is a very kind of modern person. She resonates with the 21st century. And she's a sort of clear signal of what I'm trying to do in the book, what I want to do in the book. Or, and so I started with her. And a lot of people haven't heard of her, but a lot of people have. And she's just one of those characters that it's important to understand. And so, but to come back to Iran, there's so much. And there are also so many empires that we don't know about. We all know about Cyrus the Great and Darius and the invading Greece, but that was just a sideshow for them.
I used to love Asterix as a child.
Oh, I do too. I see you have a poster here.
We do. Asterix, because in the book on Mesopotamia, whatever it might have been, the Assyrians conquer the Babylonians, who conquer the Sumerians. I mean, they've mixed up the chronology, but basically you've got all these different empires, these tribes, which ranged over hundreds of years of history.
Yeah.
It wasn't all condensed over a very short period. You've got people like Nebuchadnezzar and people like Cyrus, and these are people who would deserve whole chapters. And in your book, they do get more than a cursory glance, which is only right. But all of these were quite distinct.
Very different.
Babylonia was very different from Assyria.
Yes.
Which again was very different from Persia and Sumeria.
Yeah. I mean, I've taken a real delight in the book in really differentiating these people and telling the story in some detail of how the Persians and the Medes took over this empire, and one needs to, and then of course the subsequent Persian empires. The House of Sassanid, and so on, and the Parthians and what have you. I mean, they were the other superpower of the era, along with the East and West Rome, and it was really fun researching that, and I think it's kind of key we understand it. I mean, Persia is one of those powers that often appears in histories, at the time of the invasion of Greece, but actually with no real knowledge of the rest of the empire and how it worked.
Do you think they were just less good at recording their history, or do you think much of that was destroyed when Alexander burnt Persepolis by mistake?
I think some was probably, but I also think they didn't have the same concept of narrative history, and lots of other people don't, by the way, even now. Even in the 20th century, even the 21st century, a lot of people don't have that narrative style of history.
So, who do you like Herodotus?
I love Herodotus. I love Thucydides. I love all these ancient historians. I love Suetonius.
Oh yeah.
And I think Suetonius is sort of vanished books. There was, of course, we know about the 12 Caesars, but I think there was also a vanished book that was lost called The Greatest Whores of History.
Oh,
which,
wow.
Which I think is a sort of, could be essential reading.
Absolutely.
But Suetonius' life is interesting because, he was in the court of Hadrian and his wife. He was one of and then he vanishes, and one just wonders what happened to him, because Hadrian was such an interesting character. He was probably one of the most talented people to rule Rome, but he was also, like a lot of powerful people, pretty touchy. He didn't want to cross him. He once stabbed one of his secretaries in the eye with a pen and blinded him. So he had to be pretty careful around Hadrian. What did he?
Yet he doesn't get the treatment of Caligula or Nero because he managed to administer such extraordinary empire at its height. I mean, maybe he just gets a pass because stabbing the secretary in the eye is not really a big deal when you're doing all the other things that he was doing well.
Yeah, because even the architecture is just beautiful. The Pantheon.
The Pantheon,
in
which he
Rome,
improved. Yeah.
His mausoleum. I mean, these places. I mean, actually,
Castel
he's
Sant'Angelo.
got to be one of the great. He's got to be one of the. Just for the architecture. I mean, he's got to be the greatest builder. With just a few other people up there, with Justinian, Abdul Malik with the Dome of the Rock. There are a few of these people who've built these amazing buildings.
Augustus and Agrippa might take issue with. You remember he famously said he'd inherited it brick and left it marble.
Correct. And Herod the Great, of course, with the temple.
Yeah.
Not much of it's left, but,
So of all these places, because I can already sense something that I'm sure we both have simpatico about, is the idea of these places that are no longer there or were once there. The original Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, or even the later one, Herod's Temple, the Library of Alexandria. I mean, if you could get into a time machine, I think it would be your idea of heaven.
Yeah, the Parthenon. I mean, I'd love to have been at the Parthenon with Pericles and Phidias and make huge sculptures and all intact. I mean, that would be one of the places I'd love to go. To.
Where do you stand on the marbles being returned or not?
I don't.
It's very
mind.
controversial.
Yeah,
still.
I don't. I just think that history's very complicated. I mean, it's unraveling everything is pretty difficult. I think that where they end up reflects what happened in history, and I do think with all the sort of the talk now about returning of artifacts and reparations and. What I believe is that, perpetrators should be prosecuted if you can get them, however old they are. But I don't think you should blame, families, descendants for what their ancestors did. And I think always the best revenge, the best redemption is just the illumination of what happened without hiding anything, without concealment. Blame where blame is due, and that includes the things the British Empire did. In other words, where it comes to slavery, the fact that Britain was the greatest slave trader for 100 years, we should definitely
Don't gloss over it.
That should be part of education. Yeah. Everyone should know about that.
But it should also be part of education that Wilberforce was this incredible man who saw into the future and knew what was right to do, and that the British eventually sought out slave trade and sought to end it at their own cost.
They did, and it was and the fact is that was the beginning of the end of slavery as an international commodity, as an international trade that had gone on everywhere, in China, in East Africa, in the Indian Ocean, in the Americas, within Africa itself. It had gone on since the beginning of time. I mean, one of the first documents in the book is about a slave in ancient Sumeria. So slavery shoots through, grows through all human life, right up until the 1830s when it started to change. And of course, America had slavery for another 30 years after that.
We definitely need
Brazil for longer.
Brazil for longer. I mean, there's still slavery being perpetuated in parts of the world today, and it's a very sad state of affairs in some places that this is still going on. I'm curious. I just want to go down this flight of fantasy quickly into the time machine.
Oh yeah,
because
let's fly in the time machine.
What event? Because we've been to where? I mean, they're probably the Parthenon's a great answer. We won't spend the whole day going from place to place. But what event would you have liked to have seen the real truth of? Because there are either conflicting versions, or because you don't believe the version that you've read, or because you just would love to have seen it with your own eyes?
Well, of course, the life of Jesus Christ, because it's so massively important.
This is just such a great thing to have stumbled upon, although it's not stumbling.
Yeah, would love to have been there
this
for
intersection between religion and history, and the fact that, you know, some people say, well, it's a historian's job to cover Socrates, but not Jesus, and you can't avoid this man had, whether he was exactly as described in the Bible or not, and whether other sources can be found or not, the effect is just absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, and it's, you know, and also just the sort of progress of early Christianity, the Nazarenes, and you know, it started off as a sort of family business. It was run by his brother after him, and then his cousin. So it was you know, what most people don't realize is in the early sort of the first 30 years it was a sort of family business, the Nazarenes, and it really changed. It was the change really happened 70 after the fall of the temple in Jerusalem, when it separated from what they then regarded as an unlucky mother religion, which was clearly on the losing side of history.
Right.
And everyone wants to be on the winning side of history. So they cut off from the Jews.
How different do you think the relationship between international Jewry and Christianity might have been had that sundering not happened?
Well, it could well have been stayed part of the Jewish religion and never emerged as the world religion. But I mean, it emerged as the world religion because of the decision of one man 300 years later, obviously Constantine.
And his mother.
You
know, we talk about women, and Helena had an extraordinary influence on him.
Yeah.
And you spend quite a bit of time on her.
Yeah, because
too.
it was just so interesting. I mean, political decisions are really the sort of dominating thing with religion. I mean, the Prophet Muhammad was always a political leader as well, and he created a state, and you know, he was concerned with faith and religion as well as politics.
So the event would be the life of Jesus.
Yeah, I think the death of Jesus.
And the who, if you could, what character? Because again, this book is chock full of the most amazingly interesting people, and without being a hagiography of any one particular person, and without it having to be specific to their achievements or the things that have been written about them, who do you think is really, I mean, leaving Jesus out because of the events you've just described?
Yeah, I think Shaka Zulu would be fascinating.
Oh.
Of course, you know, we're in South Africa, so you know, the Mefakani and what happened, the forming of Southern Africa is like a huge part of my book. And you know, what I wanted to show was that, you know, the portrayal of Shaka has benefited many people. You know, the portrait of him as a sort of psychopathic lunatic, a sort of monster, has benefited all sorts of people for over 100 years. And actually, we need to reassess what the effect of the Zulus on the creation of Southern Africa, and that's all in the book. A new take on that.
I hope you'll be here long enough, or that you'll have a chance to go down to KwaZulu-Natal and see some of the places there, because I
have seen some of those battlefields. Yeah,
I am absolutely obsessed with Zulu history. I've got a friend called Muzi Kuzwayo who's promised me he's going to take me on a tour to meet village elders who have oral histories to tell.
I wish I could come
in
with
Zulu.
you on
I mean,
that.
it's just this stuff. I remember at primary school, just being fascinated with the story of Shaka. I mean, he was a hero of mine.
Yeah.
And that, despite the narrative which portrayed him the way that you've already explained, here was a guy who had built an empire in the southern part of Africa, an empire which took on the mightiest one in the world, and on a few occasions won. Also had the Boers to contend with.
Yeah.
And managed to survive. I mean, to this day, there is a descendant of Sezangakona on the throne.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
It's quite something.
Yeah, and that's very fascinating to me. But you know what? Because it's a world history, I can step back a bit as well, and show what was happening in the whole of Africa at that time, and how all these things were linked together, even in this vast continent, from Sudan and Egypt all the way down through West Africa.
And of course, early history all belongs to Africa, the very earliest.
Yeah, it all starts in Africa.
History.
So that's all very important to understand. And the complexity of Africa, the fact that it isn't all one place and it isn't all one culture, is also interesting. while recognizing its special experience, its special tragedy with Atlantic slavery.
Absolutely. Now, where would you least like to have been in history? I'm going to give you a couple of options here. Would you least like to have been a victim of Roman Gallic expansion when Caesar went in and conquered Vercingetorix and the disparate tribes of Gaul? Would you least have liked to have been in the Yucatan Peninsula when the Spanish arrived, or in India when the British were at the height of their mighty expansion in that part of the subcontinent?
Well, these are pretty unpalatable choices.
All of them are awful.
But actually, the British in India is the answer, because the British arrived in an India that was falling apart in complete chaos, and they imposed their empire there. They looted Bengal. They were extremely ruthless in building the empire. But then they did restore peace for quite a long time. They brutally crushed the Indian Mutiny. Every empire has to have an act of sort of massive violence to impose its force.
Do you think that Queen Camilla should wear the Koh-i-Noor diamond at the coronation?
I think the Queen has made the right decision with the Koh-i-Noor diamond, but the Koh-i-Noor diamond, it's always presented as a sort of unique crime of the British Empire. But in fact, this diamond was the bauble of every conqueror.
Oh, absolutely, and passed from bloody hand to bloody hand.
And I don't regard the British Empire as morally different from Nadir Shah, for example, or the Lion of the Punjab, Ranjit Singh, or any of the other sort of brutal warlords who conquered it and passed it on to other people, to the successive empires. I just don't regard the British empires as we have to be sort of treat them any differently from just because they're white.
And just because they're now.
And just because
their
recent.
descendants are around.
Just because they're recent.
You know, we don't hold the Persians responsible for destruction of ancient Greece anymore.
But there's a great Anglo-centricity, a sort of Little England version. That the British Empire is the only empire to have ever existed. In this book, I treat the British Empire very like I treat the French Empire, or the Dutch Empire, or the Spanish or Portuguese empires, which is simply a state organism that committed many crimes, always started with violence, and then struggled to hold their empire.
Well, one of the things that's I always say is this is the best time to be alive. I mean, we've got running water and electricity, and we have a good ablution, and we have good systems, and obviously there are huge problems still that we're trying to overcome, and climate is one of those things, and our destruction of the natural environment, and the fact that cities are expanding at a rate of knots, and there's lots to contend with, but it's still, I think, a quite salubrious time to be alive.
The best time to be alive in history.
But if you did have to choose another time,
I would choose Harun al-Rashid in Baghdad.
Really?
I would choose the great golden age of Arab rule in Baghdad, of the Abbasid dynasty, the 1001 Nights. If you read that chapter in the book, you'll find some of the most... Are we talking
about 1100?
No, we're talking about sort of 800.
800.
So in the 9th century. If you read that chapter, you'll find some of the most outrageous erotic and bawdy poetry and writing that you'll ever see anywhere, and you'll be surprised that this is the ultimate Islamic civilization, and yet, it's unrecognized. No one would dare write such things now, but these writers, it's a world of kind of caliphs and potentates and song and dance and poetry and sex and bisexuality. Wonderful. It's all there, and actually that's the time to be. Of course, you had to be in the right kind of literary, political circles.
Class.
Yeah, you had to be in the right class, probably, because there was also slavery in the marshes of Iraq, and there was actually almost chattel slavery. There were Africans working in those marshes, growing sugarcane.
Well, of course, we also have to, when we look at European history, people tend to look at it from a class point of view too. And, in that case, the very poor and the very lowest classes were always just cannon fodder and hard labor. But being a nobleman was not necessarily more healthy and guaranteeing of a long life. I mean, many of them had to mount up and go to war endlessly for stupid causes. They also were always the focus of plots and connivery within their own families.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily, it might have been more materially comfortable for some of them, but I think probably because of all the incredible political machinations could have also been absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, but another thing about it, which I think is interesting, is that until sort of the 18th century, late in the 18th century, even the beginning of the 19th century, it was better to be if you were ill, it was better to be a peasant than to be a noble with the most expensive medical care, because doctors were so murderous. They usually killed their patients.
I mean, even recently, up to George III, they were doing monstrous things.
Monstrous. I mean, he was being poisoned with arsenic, which would have exactly if he may already have been bipolar or schizophrenic or whatever mental illness he suffered from, but arsenic poisoning would definitely have made it a lot worse.
All right. Well, it's very difficult to ask questions about your favorite this and your favorite that, but we've gone through those, and I'm very, very happy with all these answers. I think that there are probably still things undiscovered. What part of history do you think is a big gap which needs some filling? Where are there the least sources and the most curiosity for you?
Well, I think much of African history, actually, there's such. I mean, we know about, for example, among African empires.
Only recently did people rediscover Timbuktu and the incredible Ghanaian empires.
Exactly. There are a lot of. I mean, there's huge parts of the sort
Mansa Musa.
There's huge parts of that we just don't know about. They weren't written, and there would have been some sort of records, oral records, or whatever, but they are lost for now. And similarly in South America, there's so much I'd love to know about South America which we don't know, and just extraordinary artifacts are left, but we can only guess how it all worked and how it all fitted together. So those are the places I'd love to have known more about.
What is the question most people ask you as a historian?
Nowadays they mainly ask about Ukraine, but on the book they mainly ask like why and how, and
as in why write it?
Why write it? How did you write it? And was it a COVID book? Was it a lockdown book? Which, of course, it was written in lockdown.
But you'd planned to write something like this before.
I had, yeah. But COVID, really made it easier, because I was wondering if I'd ever kind of be able to sort of do it, ever be able to pull it off, and ever be able to complete it.
How are your family about all of that?
They never want to hear the word world ever again. And they were just like, they just couldn't believe that I was actually doing it, but they sort of had faith. They're used to the only way to write these books is by complete obsession, a life of immersing yourself in it, and total obsession. The trouble with this was it never ended. There was always another book coming out, which I would order or get hold of instantly, read it overnight almost, and then encapsulate it, encompass it in the book. Commandeer its ideas if I like them.
And you said something interesting. You said you did all the editing. So there was obviously some stuff you decided to chop out.
I had the best sort of line editor, copy editor in England, who's called Peter James, who did all my early Stalin books too, who's a sort of genius. But the actual editing of the book, it's very hard to. I had a brilliant young editor. But you have to basically do this yourself, because when you're writing a history of the world, not many people can edit it. Not many people, are expert enough to sort of. Well, no one is really, and even I wasn't expert enough to write it. I did all the research myself basically, but then what I got right was getting experts to check their bits, and sitting at the feet of the great professors of Harvard and Princeton and Cambridge and Oxford, who checked, the Dutch ascent, the golden age of Holland, or the Tang of China, and they corrected it.
Is that quite a scary process, or are you completely objective about your own work? Because it's very difficult for an author, especially one as experienced and expert as you are yourself, to hand this over and say, all right, make corrections where you think necessary. I mean, it's the opposite of egocentricity.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be pretty humble and and some of their replies were pretty pungent. My eyes would sometimes.
Were there some people who you thought they're just getting back at me for something a long
Yeah,
time ago?
well, no, some of them were just very intolerant and just said, "This is just disgraceful. You must change." But the great thing was that virtually, even the most kind of brutal of them also said, like, "No, but you have got something here,"
right.
And that was interesting. For example, in Chinese history, I've done a very personal histories. I've taken a lot of the sort of chronicles of the anti-court chronicles to show, how the court worked with the emperors. And they said, well, you're using a lot of the sort of oral histories, the sort of what they call dirty histories in China, in Chinese scholarship. But they said, like, actually there is an argument to make to cover the sort of court history. Instead of covering the views of the scholars, the bureaucrat scholars who kind of wrote most of the histories. So then they suggested a way to do it. And so, in fact, my method does, in fact, bizarrely reflect a sort of a new take on Chinese history. And they offered language and ideas, structure, how to do it. So some of the most terrible, obviously, sometimes I virtually wept at my desk.
Well, it's big of you to admit that. But then this book really is extraordinary. I find myself dipping back in and out of it since I got it last year and we first spoke on the show, and I will continue to do that. It's a gift that keeps on giving, if you ask me. I can only advise anybody who loves history and who loves great storytelling to look into this book for the very reasons that we've all outlined so far in this discussion. What do you think would be the most extraordinary find, either archaeologically, something like Alexander's body or the Ark of the Covenant or Emperor Qi's tomb in China?
Well, I think the grave of I think the grave of Alexander would be the most amazing, the Soma, where his body was, and I think the sort of Ptolemy's hijacking of his body, of Alexander's body has got to be the great sort of necrophile kidnapping of all time.
It was more valuable than most of the land which the others all claimed. I mean, when they're all standing around the bed of Alexander in 323 BC.
Yeah, and you have the body. Whoever had the body controlled the world. That was the idea, and of course the Ptolemies put it to really good use right up until Cleopatra, and And there's a lot to be said for the body. I mean, Putin stealing Prince Potemkin's body.
Right.
Very recently.
No.
I mean, this is going on now in 2023, 2022. Just 6 months ago, Putin stole the body of Prince Potemkin. Potemkin and Catherine were the first. Catherine the Great and Potemkin was my first history book. And it's now a kind of important book because it really tells the story of how your
Romanov's book is just fantastic.
But that particular book tells the story of how the Romanovs and Russia annexed Ukraine and Crimea. So it's kind of like very relevant now. Well, it's relevant, and if anyone wants to know how on earth Russia ended up with Ukraine and Crimea, and what Putin has based his claim on, that Catherine the Great and Potemkin is the story that does it. But of course, also it's the story of the greatest love affair in history, all told in their letters. So it's an interesting book.
And of course, there were scurrilous rumors about her, which you attempt to dispel in the book too. Terrible things that were said by her successor and son.
Yeah, and they were said about Potemkin as well. I mean, the phrase Potemkin village,
right,
is part of popular discourse, but there were no Potemkin villages. I mean, Potemkin founded cities like Mariupol, Odessa, Sebastopol, Kherson.
Places that are in the news right now.
They're huge cities, so they weren't Potemkin. Those were the Potemkin villages. So you can see that actually Potemkin was one of the great successful imperial colonizer of all time. Now, being an imperialist, especially a Russian imperialist, is certainly out of fashion at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
But Catherine and Potemkin, they were ruthless imperialists, ruthless Russian imperialists, but they were also humane. They were also part of the Enlightenment.
Absolutely.
They couldn't have been more different from Putin, who's now commandeered their story for his own
nationalistic,
ultra-nationalistic ends, which is horrible. They would have hated him.
So we've come full circle again, and I'm so pleased we got to sit down and talk one more time. And well done again on the book, but we end on Russia again.
Thanks for having me.
It is the most important story in the world right now. So.
It is the big story in the world, and I mean, a lot of, if the book ends with Ukraine and Russia, and I think there's a sort of, I show how Ukraine developed in the book in considerable detail, including some bits that are sort of less covered now. For example, the Ukraine during what happened in Ukraine in World War II. So the key thing about Ukraine is to support Ukraine, support Ukrainian democracy and the right to sort of be free of Russia, while not concealing the darker bits of Ukrainian history, particularly in World War II, which we shouldn't conceal.
Well, you don't leave anything concealed in your book. Thank you so much for writing it, and thank you for coming to see us.
Thank you so much for having me. Fun as always. Thanks, Clip.
Thank you.